Welcome to Penumbra. The conversation starts now. Good afternoon and welcome to the very first episode of Penumbra. I am excited to have my first guest with me, Dave Ward. Dave Ward is the proprietor and founder of Buddy Brew Coffee here locally in Tampa. Welcome and thanks for joining me, Dave.
Well, it's great to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a fabulous treat having you as my first guest on Podnumbra. And just a little bit of a roadmap what we're going to be doing today, Dave. I want to delve into the origin story of Buddy Brew and basically how you and your wife Susan decided to go from being in the world of finance to being in the very competitive world of coffee.
Okay, sounds good.
Right.
Sounds good. Yep.
So just for starters, where'd you grow up?
Well, I'm a Midwestern kid. So I was actually born in Michigan, and my dad was a store manager for J.C. Penney, and so we kind of moved as his career progressed. And so we moved literally right around Lake Michigan. So moved from Michigan to Indiana, lived there for a couple years, and then ended up in Wisconsin. So I really call Wisconsin home. I was there the beginning of seventh grade all the way through college.
Okay, and growing up in the Midwest in Wisconsin, what does a kid from Wisconsin do to keep himself busy outside of the schoolhouse?
Well, gosh, I think normal kid stuff, lots of, kick the can. And, for me, it was all about sports. So I played football, tennis, soccer, and fun things were like my dad was a ski patrol guy. So we grew up skiing. And so I skied every spare second I could in the winters, and skiing is still one of my most favorite things I could ever do. But that's kind of what it was. It was a normal childhood, lots of, great family, great parents. Have a younger sister who's, my best friend other than my wife. And so it was a great childhood, tons of kids in our neighborhoods where I lived and we just had an unbelievable time building forts and first kisses and all that fun stuff. It was awesome.
Yeah. What town in Wisconsin are you from?
Appleton, Wisconsin. Yep.
And other than growing up and doing all the sports that you just mentioned, skiing, you don't generally think of Wisconsin as a skiing state, but I guess there is some skiing that happens there.
Yeah, for sure. So Wisconsin does have a number of ski places, like resorts, I suppose. But really, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is where most of the better skiing is. And so these would be like places that are maybe like a quarter of the size of like a Park City or Breck or something like that. So tons of skiing, riding a lot of lifts, but tons of skiing too. So it was great.
Okay. And then after you graduated from high school in Appleton, I assume, where'd you go to college?
The University of Wisconsin at Madison. So that's where me and most of my fellow friends and high school mates went. And then from there, most of us either went to Chicago or Milwaukee. I chose Chicago. So I actually followed in my dad's footsteps. I became what they call a merchandise manager in the J.C. Penney world, which is really like a department manager for them. And I managed a couple $1 million men's department in one of the large metro stores in Chicago. So that's kind of what I did. And then I got an offer from Nestle Foods to be a retail sales rep. So selling all of Nestle's delectables from Crunch bars to 100 grand bars to Taster's Choice coffee into grocery stores. And so that was my first big sales job. And anyway, yeah.
Okay. So was selling Taster's Choice, was that your first foray into the coffee industry as a young adult?
I've never really looked at it like that, but I think that it probably was because Taster's Choice at the time, and Nescafe, those were all their products, were pretty highly sought after products in the grocery world. So yeah, it was, I was already a coffee freak by then. That started my freshman year of college. And so I just loved coffee. So yeah, I guess that you're right.
Was there a local coffee shop in Madison that you recall going to when you were a student there, like that drove your passion?
For sure. Yeah. So in college, my best friend and I ran a sporting goods store. It started off as just, regular old employees, but then over the course of the next couple of years took over the store. And so right down from that sporting goods store was a coffee shop. And the name is escaping me at this moment, but it was awesome. They probably had 30 different beans from all over the world, and they also had bagels. And so we'd go down there every morning and get a cup of coffee and a bagel, and that's how we started our day.
And I assume while you're in Wisconsin, you didn't study coffee roasting. What was your, field of study?
Economics.
Okay, economics, and then after you graduated from Wisconsin, is that when you went to work for JCPenney right after that?
Yes, JCPenney and then Nestle. Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously at some point in time, you wound your way found your way down here to Florida. Tell me how you got from Wisconsin, to the Sunshine State.
Well, it was one blistery morning in January, and I looked like the kid from Christmas Story, bundled up, but I was in a suit, but trench coat, like the scarf, long johns, head to toe, all that stuff, and I could barely even bend my arm to scrape my windows. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there has got to be a better way than this. So I called my buddy, my best friend, and said, hey. Let's go south. And he was married. I had a girlfriend at the time. And so we all decided to pack up and go to Naples, Florida, which his wife's family had relocated there. And so we at least had, a home base, so to speak, because we were all really close family friends, and so that's how we got to Florida, and we settled in Naples, and I was there for 12 years. That's where I met my beautiful wife and business partner, Susan, and you know, the rest is kind of history. That was 30
All
years
right.
ago.
Okay, and down in Naples, were you still working for JCPenney, or were you doing a different line of work at that time?
No, I quit, packed up, and went down there with no job. It
Oh,
just
wow,
went
just
went to go. Like I was 25 at the time, and so had some money saved, and so we went down there and just looked for jobs. And I ended up getting into the insurance and investment business. And I was working for a company called the New England, which was based out of Boston, and they were opening an office there. And so I was the first employee hired for that office. So I had to get all my insurance and investment licenses and did all that stuff, which eventually led to me starting my own business in that world. And my largest customer was Naples Community Hospital, and so I had a piece of their supplementary retirement program, and that's how I met my wife. So she was a nutritionist for the hospital, and they had just opened a brand new wellness center, and I was doing a little retirement seminar for the new employees there, and she had just started, and she wasn't in my meeting, but I'm handing out business cards and answering questions. And she popped her head in and said, hey, my dad told me I need to talk to you, talk to somebody about my retirement. And, next time you're around, would you mind popping in? I'm like, oh, I think I might. So that's how we met. And yeah, we didn't start dating immediately, but about 6 months later, I had a girlfriend at the time. We had broken up, and she was the first call I made. Yeah.
so just to recap real quick what you told me, you broke up with JCPenney, then you broke up with your girlfriend, and then you and Susan started your relationship. And what year was that when all this, transpired?
Well, let's see. So I moved to Naples in uh, February of 1990. I met Susan in probably August of 95. We started dating in 96 and we're married by March of 97.
All right. March of '97, Susan and you get married. Was Susan also a coffee enthusiast when you guys got together?
Percent. Yeah, the first gift I ever gave her was a $15 coffee maker from Walmart. So, yeah, there's no doubt. And so she would hang out in local coffee shops. And Starbucks had already started to kind of proliferate across the country, but Naples had one Starbucks. And so we weren't hanging out at Starbucks. We were hanging out at this little coffee shop, like a local place that was awesome. And obviously, wherever she went, I went. So I started hanging out with her in the coffee shop, and it was fantastic. Was really the beginning of our coffee adventure, I would say, and where we really began to really pursue a better cup. So we joined coffee clubs, first of all, we got married, that happened. And then we really began to pursue coffee from like a brewing point of view, from a bean point of view, joining coffee clubs from across the country. And at the time, we were manually brewing coffee, like in a little Melita, like single cup cone filter thing. We also had a French press and a Chemex, and we're always chasing something better. And then we ended up moving to Tampa in late 2002. We had friends that had came up and visited us from Naples, and the guy goes, "I'm going to blow your mind," and he pulls out this hot air popcorn popper looking thing. And he goes, we're going to roast some coffee tonight. And tomorrow morning, we're going to drink it. And so we did. And I'm like, OMG, this is like unbelievable. I'm in. So that day, I went out and bought all my first roasting stuff. And that was That was kind of the beginning of it all. And we had no idea exactly what we were doing, but what we did know was is that fresh roasted coffee simply was better than anything you could buy in a grocery store. So that began this whole several year journey of kind of refining what we were doing, making it better and better, serving it at dinner parties, taking over like our office's coffee programs. And people were all like, oh my gosh, what is this stuff? It's freaking phenomenal. And we would kind of laugh. And so, when the recession kind of was rearing its ugly head in kind of the summer of 2007, I was in the commercial real estate world on the finance side of things. And really, commercial real estate is a leading edge indicator of the economy. And it was looking like Armageddon was going to happen. And so anyway, I didn't lose my job or anything like that, but over the course of the next year and a half or so, salaries were taken away, that kind of stuff. And so I just really, really began thinking about I don't know where this is going to go, but it's not good. So I wrote a business plan. And in the fall of 2008, threw up our first website and people started to buy coffee. And really by the end of 2009, it had grown to the point where it was really demanding somebody full time. So I finally left the real estate world and began to pursue Buddy Brew full time. So that led to us opening our first cafe, which really was the cafe was a dream. Really, we just wanted a place to legally be able to roast coffee. And that was at our Kennedy location. And at the same time, all this was happening, Susan's company, she was in the pharmaceutical world. She was a district sales manager for a large pharmaceutical company. And their product was going off patent. So, and becoming generic. So she ended up taking a voluntary separation deal and she joined, and she was involved from the very beginning, obviously, in this whole thing. But she joined full time in June of 2010. So that was kind of how it all happened.
Now, I just want to back up. You provided me a lot of information there, and I want to ask you a few questions about exactly the origin story because I've been told snippets over the years, having known you. So
Yep.
you just provided me with a lot of additional information. But when you said you were initially chasing that better cup of coffee when you were hanging out those coffee shops in Naples with Susan in the early years, in your professional opinion, what was that cup of coffee lacking that you felt that could be better?
Freshness, first and foremost. That was the biggest thing. But once you kind of get into coffee is actually pretty complex. It's actually way more complex than even wine is. So wine has typically about 800 different flavor characteristics that you can pull out. Coffee has almost 2000. So when you kind of get into it, it's like it becomes a thing for sure. But really, I think in the end, freshness is one of the biggest things. But the second thing is a balanced cup. And that's like where you're using roasting techniques to kind of bring out all these beautiful subtleties and nuances in the bean, which includes sweetness. And it's not like you're going to drink a cup of black coffee and go, oh my gosh, that's a sugar bomb. But when you really get into it, you can really tell the difference. And why that's important is because sweetness offsets bitterness. And so when you get a well balanced cup, there's many components to that balance, but sweetness is a big one. And so that's what we were chasing. Does that answer your
Okay. So
question?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, sure. And I guess the perfect cup of coffee, I guess, obviously, the closer you can get it to when it was freshly roasted, like that's obviously going to drive the flavor complexion of the cup in a big way. Not to mention the beans that are incorporated. But if it's not fresh, it's never going to be as good as you would like it.
Oh, for sure. Coffee is, because it is a plant, and it ages quickly once it's roasted, hitting that kind of peak flavor window is essential to a phenomenal cup. And, typically, what happens once coffee is roasted is that it's off gassing carbon dioxide. And that the cup, that coffee comes alive once most of that CO2 has been bled off. And that's why when you buy a bag, you see a little valve on it. That valve is to let CO2 out. Because if you didn't have that valve, literally that bag would explode. That's how much gas is being off gas during that process. So you squeeze it and you smell that like fresh roasted coffee. You're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? Well, that's what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
uh,
really that time frame, is anywhere, it takes, depending on the roast level, anywhere from, I would say 2 to probably 7 days for it to completely off gas. And then you have a time period where the coffee becomes it's just at its peak. That's where it's at its most amazing.
And let me ask you this, when you were developing your business plan and deciding to get into the uber competitive world of coffee sales, coffee roasting, et cetera, could you think of coffee in the industry? And you have the behemoths, you already mentioned one, Starbucks, the Dunkin' Donuts, the McDonald's. But in addition to that, basically every room you walk into, there's going to be coffee offered, whether it be at the church, at the gas station, at your office, at the AA meeting, wherever it is, there's going to be coffee either for sale or for free, right?
Yep.
And was that when you were deciding to get into this field, was that a concern of yours? Like I'm jumping into this super competitive environment where, in my opinion, not only have you succeeded, you've excelled, especially in our local
Yeah.
area. I mean, I synonymize Buddy Brew Coffee with coffee in Tampa. I mean, I think you guys are right on par with, cigars and things of that nature that like you're what makes Tampa Tampa when it comes to coffee, in my opinion.
Well, that's high praise, Will, and I appreciate that. Well, the reality of it was at the time is that we operate in a very specific piece of the coffee world. So, some interesting facts about coffee. Coffee is the second most traded commodity in the world, only to one thing, and that's oil. That's how big the coffee world
Well,
is. But we operate in what's called specialty coffee. And that's not like saying craft coffee or gourmet coffee. It's a designation of coffee. And what that means, the literal definition is coffee without defect. So like wine, it's graded on a 100-point scale. And so in order to be specialty, it has to grade out at 80 points or higher. And typically the coffees that Buddy Brew buys are 85 points or higher. And we dip into the low 90s from time to time, but these are like exquisite coffees that are crazy expensive. So, but the point though is that this coffee is it represents really the top 2% of all coffee available in the world. It's a very, very tippy top of coffee. That's what we buy from. So at the time, there was no specialty coffee in Tampa. There were people who were saying they were specialty coffee, but they really weren't. And even if they were buying specialty coffee, what they were doing to the coffee was ruining it. So we, for once in our lives, hit the timing just about perfect. The foodie revolution was happening, and we became part of that foodie revolution from a coffee perspective. And some people were looking for something better, something higher quality, something that was more experiential, like meaning they were going to experience something that was awesome, not only just from what the product was, but in an environment that was right as well. And I think we hit the nail on the head from those perspectives. And so it went kind of wild. It kind of blew us away, especially given that we weren't even really starting out to open a cafe. It was really just to be a tasting room where people could experience what we were doing and then sell wholesale. But like you said, it is a competitive marketplace. There's no doubt. Being like an insurance, ex-insurance and investment guy, Susan selling a very complicated drug. We thought selling something as simple as coffee was going to be like the easiest thing we ever did. Well, it wasn't like that. It was a closed door. They're like Buddy Brew Coffee, never heard of it. $10 a pound? Oh hell no. And so the cafe is really what opened that door because people would come in and say and have a latte for the first time, and there was a spot on our floor where they'd take that first sip and they're like, what is this? I've never had this before. This is freaking amazing. And that's when we knew we were onto something kind of big. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess in order to get into the market and create the demand, you had to facilitate a space to create that demand, and by opening your own space and basically inviting the public and says, "Come try it. You're gonna like it, and you're gonna be back."
Yeah, it's exactly right.
That
And I think the other component to this whole thing is that my wife and I, do have the gift of hospitality. And so the idea of inviting people into your home, what's the first thing you do when you invite somebody over? You offer them something to eat or drink. A cafe is no different than that. It's the exact same thing that we do every single day in our cafes. And then what's happening in those moments? You're sharing your life with somebody, your hopes, your dreams, your pain, your frustrations, whatever that is. It happens all over cups of coffee, right? And so in our shops, they're designed for that specific purpose to create community, to bring people together, and people that don't even know each other become friends over time because they're hanging out in the shop at the same time. And we've seen people come travel buddies. We've seen people get married. We've seen employees marrying customers. Life is really happening there and community is being created. And for us, we knew that that's exactly what our shops needed to embody, all those things. But it couldn't stop there. It had to also press outside of the four walls of our shops. And we had to be a bright light in our community. And that's why we give away more coffee than you could ever imagine for that very reason. We surge into things where there's a need, and whether it's a hurricane or a flood or whatever, we're going to be the last to close and the first to open. And especially when you go through something like what happened a couple of years ago, where we had back-to-back hurricanes, and like Davis Islands as a great example, people lost everything. All they had was a backpack on their back, but there we were serving a cup of coffee for free, giving them a croissant. In those moments, you see exactly how important a cup of coffee is and what it really means to people in those moments. But it can't
Yeah,
stop there, Will. It can't stop there. It has to go all the way back to where the hardest work in coffee is done, and that's at the farmer level. Because all this coffee is grown in the most impoverished areas of the world, where they don't have food security, they don't have clean water. A lot of times they don't even have electricity. And so we, by doing how we do what we do, which is relationally purchasing the coffee, we know these farmers, we know the co-ops, we know the importers. They get a much higher price. We cut the fat out of the middle. So the farmer receives the benefit of this higher purchase price. And the gift of time is that we get to see a new irrigation system, a new processing facility, a new truck, a new home, whatever those things are. But even more important than those things, which are super important, is the fact that now they have money to buy books and uniforms for their kids so they can go to school, because without those things, they can't go to school. And so it's transformational. And that's really the big why of what we do. It's that very thing right there.
transforming the world through a cup of coffee.
Well, here's our vision statement: to share joy and inspire hope that transforms our community and our world. It took us a year and a half to develop those 13 words,
That's nice.
but we live by it. We live
No,
by it.
I know you do, and that's a fantastic sentiment, and it's obviously something that's needed in our community. It's something that's needed in the world, for sure. And touching on that, Dave, where you source your coffee, it's my understanding that the majority of all coffee is grown within the equator, like kind of around the in that area, right? Isn't that where coffee comes from?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It really is. It goes up as high as the Tropic of Cancer and goes down low to the Tropic of Capricorn. And that band around the world is where all specialty coffee is grown. Not
And
all coffee, but all specialty coffee. Yep.
all specialty coffee that you source from, right?
Yep. Yep.
And starting out just being a coffee enthusiast, hobby roaster in your garage way back when to where you are now, how did you and Susan, how did you build those relationships with those farmers around the world? Like, walk me through that process of like your first trip and, how'd you first strike out to say, "Oh, we're gonna go find some coffee today and get the tickets. We're going to we're going to Ecuador," or whatever.
Yeah. Well, back when we started, I mean, you could Google, coffee importer or, green coffee beans or something like that, and you wouldn't find anything. And so really, I was desperately trying to find, a source for green coffee, and then stumbled on a company finally. I mean, it took forever, that was based out of California. And so I called them and they said, "Oh gosh, what's your volumes?" I'm like, "I don't have any volume." And they said, "And by the way, so you're located really on the East Coast. We have a sister company based out of New Jersey. You call them." So I did. And because we were so teeny, they hooked me up with the newest importer guy on their team. And that guy became a really good friend. And so he helped teach us how to source coffee. That's really how it started. And that was like, a world opening up to us, because now we couldn't find any green coffee that was worth anything. I mean, it was like you can find commodity coffee, but that stuff's, horrible. So anyway, that's how it all started. And that was an education process that took a while. But as we kind of grew and began to really develop relationships, both on the importer side and on the farming side, then it became a lot easier. That said, that is one of the toughest things we do is source coffee, and it is all relational. And the beautiful part about specialty coffee is that once you begin to buy from these farmers, because of that relationship, you kind of have the first right of refusal on the coffee. So there's protection for us too in this relationship, because they don't want to, they just want to know their coffee is going to get bought, right? And bought at not just a fair price, but a great price. And so that's what happens over time. So it wasn't like it was an instantaneous thing or a snap of a fingers. It was years, of doing this. And quite frankly, is I'm not going to say I was the best roaster in the world, but I knew what I was doing, and I was trained by one of the best. The guy that replaced me, I haven't, I don't roast anymore. He's far better than I ever was, and he's the guy that really holds all these relationships now, right? And he's phenomenal. And so then he's been with us for, gosh, 15 years now. Yeah. So, but I still know them all. I still talk to them. And we just got back from San Diego, which is our annual convention. It travels from city to city. right? We get to see everybody. And we get to see the farmers because a lot of farmers come. And if the farmers aren't there, then their co-ops are there or their importer will be there. And we get to renew and see and do, experience um, um, a great time kind of reconnecting over their coffee. And so it's awesome.
That's great. Other than, establishing those connections with the farmers, where you source your beans from around the world, what was the most difficult part about getting into the coffee industry, here in Tampa? And how'd you overcome it?
There is a discovery process, right? And I think that we knew we had an unbelievable product, but everybody else didn't know that. So getting that message out, was critical. And so that took time. And that was hard. Like I said, without the cafe, it would have been even harder because people could experience it, But, I think the hardest stuff for me was the fact it's like, I don't know if you've read the book, The Entrepreneurial Myth, the E Myth, the Great E Myth. That book is all about what happens to somebody like Susan and I, who have a great idea, have a skill, maybe a talent, and then set off and like, we can do this better, we can do this differently, and they start off on this thing. Well, what happens is that it becomes a business. You find some success, then all of a sudden, you're doing books and you're doing payroll and you're hiring and you're firing and all the stuff that goes along with a business, that's a lot. It's a lot. And so the thing about Susan and I are that I probably is what are even maybe not more important than hospitality, because I think hospitality is the most important, is this idea of grittiness. We're just gritty. We don't give up. And there was 1,000 roadblocks. As an example, our Kennedy location, which was our first, that was probably the 15th place we tried to get to rent to us so we could even have a place to roast coffee. Nobody would rent to us. Coffee roaster? I don't even know what that is. Hell no. I'm not doing that. Right. And the funny part of that story is that they were the first people we contacted. And then after all this failure of trying to find a place, we went back to him and basically, pleaded with him. And then he finally relented because he had a bad tenant and said, okay, what do I have to lose? I already got a bad tenant. What difference does it make? So he finally rented to us, and that's how we came on that spot. So there's 1,000 of those kind of stories, Will, about the challenges of a small business. And we still think of our business as a baby. We got a long way to go.
How many stores do you have locally?
We have 8, we operate 7 of them, and we're about to open 10 more cafes embedded in Sprouts grocery stores that we will operate fully, and those 10 will be open starting in June and probably will all be open by the end of July, I would say.
So those sprouts obviously located in Tampa and elsewhere?
Yeah, it's basically the greater Tampa Bay area, so it's Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Sarasota counties, and that's the first 10. So basically, we contracted with Sprouts for all of Florida and Georgia. And so who knows how many that will lead to. But there are 55 stores in Florida currently. Not all of them
Wow.
can fit a retrofitted embedded cafe. But I think there's a lot of upside there for sure.
That sounds
And,
awesome.
and it's a wonderful company too. I love Sprouts. Those people are amazing.
Tell me a little bit about the challenge presented by cold brew coffee and how you overcame that.
When we started, we hadn't really even heard of cold brew because cold brew wasn't like was a thing, but it wasn't a big thing. And so we hired a guy who really helped us shape our espresso program. But the first thing he told us and he was just a guy off the street that came in and he ended up working for us for 7 years. He said, you got to have cold brew. And I'm like, cold brew? I don't even know what cold brew is. What is it? Right. So back in the day, there was a system called Toddy. And Toddy was like a 5-gallon bucket that had this nylon filter and a paper filter, and you put 5 pounds of coffee in it, and you filled it up with 5 gallons of water, and then you let it sit for like 12 hours or 15 hours. And that's how you got cold brew. It was like there was no heat. And so caffeine is actually a heat sensitive molecule. So when you brew hot, obviously the extraction time is a lot less than if you brew cold. But by brewing hot, you're also brewing caffeine out of the coffee. So it's literally dissipating. So cold brew, because there is no heat involved, retains a lot of that caffeine. So cold brew becomes like a very caffeinated product. So our cold brew, like our 10.5 ounce can of cold brew, which is called Bolt, by the way, and there's a reason because it gives you energy. It's like a freaking lightning shot right to your heart. It's amazing. Has the equivalent of 3 12-ounce cup hot cups of coffee. So there's a lot of caffeine in this stuff. It's amazing. The other nice thing is that heat also there's downsides to heat in that in the extraction process it also brings out bitterness. And so cold brew is much less bitter than brewed coffee is, hot brewed coffee. And so it's this ends up being this ultra smooth, highly caffeinated product that kind of is awesome. I mean, not kind of, it is awesome. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Obviously you guys started out roasting coffee and then all of a sudden, cold brew came on the scene and you're like, well, we need to offer that. So it's just it's an interesting process to hear how you overcame that. And
Well,
I've tried the bolt and it does, it does give you a bolt of caffeine. That's for sure.
yeah, it'll make you jiggle. There's no doubt. Yeah. So our biggest issue really was volume. So we would build these like almost towers of these toddies in our stores where we'd have like three or four. I think that the biggest one was five just to keep up with the demand for cold brew. And you can imagine being in, Tampa, Florida, it's hot. So people loved cold brew. It was cold, it was refreshing, all that stuff. So we just knew that we had to come up with it was something different to do this thing. And so we devised our entire own cold brewing system, which really is comprised of two 1,200-gallon tanks that we kind of borrowed the technology out of the craft beer world. And Tampa, has like some of the best craft beers I think in the country, and so we knew all those guys because many times they would actually use coffee in their beer application. We would roast it for them. So we knew them all. So anyway, we found a company out of St. Pete called Brewfab who made our tanks for us, and then we borrowed technology from the pharmaceutical world where we are creating sterilized product. So what comes out of our tanks is literally sterile. There's nothing in it at all other than coffee and water, and we only use organic beans for our cold brew. And so it's about as clean of a energy drink as you can get. That's all that's in there: coffee and water.
Do the Buddy Brew patrons, do they prefer cold brew to iced coffee, or is that just a different crop of people depending on what they're looking for at the time?
I don't I think it all depends. I don't know if there is a clear delineation. I would say like right now, iced lattes are some of the hottest products we have. And if you look at the industry, iced lattes are kind of probably the most popular drink across, all the companies like Buddy Brew. That said, in Florida particularly, but across the country, cold brew is a growing segment of our business nationwide. So I think it's both.
What would you say, what's the most difficult aspect about running your business day to day?
Oh gosh, that's a good one, Will. I think the best part of our business is the people, but it's also the hardest part. So, we have I don't know, probably 130 to 135 people right now. So there's always just people stuff, and people have things that are going on, right? But I think, but it's also like I had mentioned before, it's also the most beautiful part of our business. And when I used to do all the interviewing, the first question I would ask, these people is like, the interviewees, like, what business do you think we're in? And they would say something like, oh, well, you run cafes or you're a coffee roaster. And those answers aren't wrong, but we're really a people business, and more specifically a people happiness business, and it just comes in the form of a freaking wild ass cup of coffee, right? And great customer service and great store aesthetics, and all those things, right? So we are a people company first and foremost, and I want to say that more than anything. If you even look at our list of values, the number one value of our company is people. I've never seen that as a value in a value statement before, just as a value. And so I say that to answer the question, because always people always want to know what's the most challenging stuff. People are challenging, but
Yeah.
but at the heart we love people the most. And so even though it is the most challenging part of our business at times, it's also the most rewarding and the best part because that's really who we are.
And following on that, answer, which is great, do you envision a future at Buddy Brew where, the baristas behind the counter are automatonic robots, as the advent of AI and this fleet of robots that are coming from Elon Musk at some time in the not too distant future, do you ever envision having a robot barista behind the counter at a Buddy Brew locally?
Can I imagine it? Yes. Do I think it will ever happen at Buddy Brew? No. But I can tell you this, I mentioned San Diego and our big, huge convention. The last couple of years, with the exception of this year, there have been a lot of robotics at the show doing that very thing. And I'm literally like, using AI and them ordering through a screen saying, yeah, I would like a 4 vanilla shot latte and this robot going, okay, thank you very much for your order. Do the whole thing. It's pretty amazing. This year, though, no robotics. Didn't see any of it. So,
I could certainly see that being a useful benefit, maybe at like an airport coffee shop, where, just the human interaction is less than desired on both ends just because of, the situation that you find your spot can deal with a little bit more, stress under the circumstance. Rather your stores, where people are coming to stay and hang out and they wanna be there as opposed to they want to get out of there as soon as possible, "Just give me my coffee."
right. Yeah, yeah. I think you're probably right.
All right. I think you already touched on this as far as being gritty, but as far as being a business entrepreneur, what habit or habits made you successful in what you do?
Man, you're asking tough questions. What habit? Well, I think never allowing an easier path um, that leads to a quality compromise is very super difficult. And so the habit is like just not ever going there. The habit is like, oh, sounds like a great idea, but if it's going to be a hit to quality, we're not doing it. And there's a lot of great ideas. And that's not to say that every idea that could be more efficient or whatever is bad. They're great, but it can't come at the cost of whether it's the quality of the customer service, the quality of the actual product in the cup or on the plate. Those so it's just that constant and never ending push to quality on aspects. I think that's the
Don't take a shortcut if it's gonna lead to an inferior product.
well, there are just some non-negotiables, right? And that's one of them. So could you make some of those choices that might be able to make you more money quicker? For sure. I don't think those businesses stay in business. So I think taking the hard road, the narrow road is a habitual daily thing that you just got to just keep the blinders on. I don't care. Let's go. But this is it.
What do you think the coffee industry is gonna look like in 10 years from now?
I think that's another great question, Will. We already see AI pervasively entering our space, and we use AI continuously. We like it's phenomenal. But I think because of who we are, like not who exactly Buddy Brew is specifically, but I think the industry in general is a people business. And so you can't take the people out of it and still have a business. Now, does that mean you can't get a cup of coffee from a vending machine? Of course you can. And will that stuff improve? Probably. But I think what makes our business special is really what happens over the cup of coffee in the shops or in your home serving Buddy Brew because it's special, it's different, it's something better. So in 10 years, will it be different? I'm sure it will be in some subtle ways, but the people part of it, which is the biggest part of it, won't change at all.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, and I think that no matter what the robots of the future replace in our lives, they'll never be able to replace that human connection that is what Buddy Brew represents to its customers and what people just in our hearts, that's what we want. We want to connect with people because that's how beings operate, and the robots may make things easier, but at the end of the day, they're never gonna be able to replace that.
Exactly. I think you're exact. Like
When Buddy Brew is over and done with, what do you want to be most remembered by? Well, not to say that it's gonna be done with as in, like, it'll conclude, but, hope that never happens, but what do you want your lasting legacy to be in this.
that you don't have to compromise and still gain success, right? That there is a better path, where you're not giving something up to get to the next place. I think that from an employee's perspective, I would say, regardless if you're here for 6 months or you're here for 2 years or 15 years, if you look back on your time at Buddy Brew, my hope would be is that it was time well spent, that they learned something, and not just how to make a great cup of coffee, right?
Yeah,
It was
that's great.
how to be truthful and honest, and how to also be vulnerable in the same moment, which I think is the difference. So it's like when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, this latte sucks." You don't say, "Oh hell no, it's not. I made it. It's freaking phenomenal." No, it's like you have to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Maybe I heard your order wrong. What can I do to make it right?" And I think that idea, I hope people can walk away from with maybe just a shred more humility, a shred more vulnerability, that they can apply to their lives. And so for me, I think this idea of love, because quite frankly, you haven't asked this question yet, but you might, is that, what's your business strategy, Dave? What is our strategy? Our strategy is one simple thing. It's love.
That's great.
A love for the product, a love for the people, a love for, and people includes not just our customers, but our employees as well, right? And our communities, people, our farmers, people.
Absolutely. One more question, then I'll get to, what I call the wild card round. Tell me about your mascot, Buddy. Tell me
Yes.
origin of Buddy, how he came to be. and how'd you landed on the name Buddy Brew? Just explain that to me.
That's a great question. Right after we got married, Susan and I decided to get a dog. It was probably 3 months after we were married. We found a buddy. His name was supposed to be Cooper, but he was an animal control dog, and and so we met him and didn't know didn't he didn't have a name, and so just as a course over the couple weeks that we kind of were just kind of checking him out and him checking us out, we just started calling him Buddy, and so that's how we actually got his name. But anyway, he became the love of our life. He was our kid, our child, and everything that he represented, which is things like family member, unconditional love, loyalty, best friend, he encapsulated. So when in this idea of a coffee company and the idea of really what that should look like and this idea of community and coming together, well, who do you do that with? You do it with your buddy, right?
It's my understanding that Buddy's no longer with us, but you have a
Yep.
buddy number two, obviously not a buddy, but a subsequent an heir, so to speak, that
Yes.
remains.
Yeah, yeah, we had to put, the original Buddy down in August of 2013, and Vinny, who is now Buddy 2, his middle name's Buddy, is is the new mascot, acting CEO, of our company, and he actually looks more like the logo than even, than the original did. So, yeah, and he's an awesome dog.
That's great. All right, now on to the wild card rounds,
Yep.
Dave. It's just a couple of questions. It can be a yes or no or an affirmative response, and we'll just knock them out. Cats, dogs or cats?
Dogs for sure, but I love cats too.
Okay. The moon landing, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Coke or Pepsi?
Mexican coat, Diet Pepsi,
I agree with the Mexican Coke part. Aliens.
probably.
Okay. If you could fly, time travel, or be invisible, which one would you choose and why?
I've always had dreams of flying. I mean, literally, I dream that I can fly. So I'm going flying. I don't know. I was supposed to be a pilot. I think that was my dream was to be a pilot. And so anyway, it didn't turn out that way. Obviously, I wear glasses, but anyway,
What's your favorite food?
lobster.
What's your favorite sport or hobby?
Gosh, that's a toughie. I would say skiing.
Does ketchup belong on a hot dog?
Yes.
What's your favorite book or movie?
Oh my gosh, I would say my favorite book.
And it could be a movie that was made into a book, so you could double up.
Yeah, The Lord of the Rings, probably be right up there. I've probably read that the most. I probably read them through, including The Hobbit, probably 4 times, so I love them. Shawshank Redemption probably would be my movie.
And one more speed round question: how does Dave Ward take his coffee?
Black.
All right, a purist. All right, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us today on Pod Numbra. And before we go, can you can you just tell us where can people learn more about Buddy Brew Coffee?
Pound Buddy Brew Coffee will get you where you need to go. Yep.
And if you were to recommend one person that I should interview next, who would that be?
Wow. My wife.
That's a great answer. That's what I was thinking too. I can get the real story about Buddy Brew.
I married way up, and she is my 100% partner. We just do different things, and so without her, there would be no Buddy Brew. She is amazing. Yeah,
No,
and as gritty as I am, she's like tenfold more gritty. So yeah.
fantastic. Well, Dave, again, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me on Pod Number. You did an excellent job, and I just go get a cup of coffee.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Will. I've really enjoyed our time. This has been amazing.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, see ya.